Hey guys, Loco here with some brand new content. Unfortunately, this year, Western teams didn't make it into semis at all, and I want to talk about that, why NA and EU teams don't have the kind of success that the Eastern teams do, the Koreans and the Chinese teams internationally, especially at Worlds. Weaker regional competition. First and most obviously, NA and EU are less competitive leagues than Korea and China historically. The Chinese player base dwarfs both NA and EU completely. They have like 17 servers, and all the good players play on one server, Ionia. And Korea has been a powerhouse since the dawn of competitive League of Legends. We've just been good since Season 2. By having weaker home regions, top teams such as TSM and G2 go almost unchallenged in their respective leagues compared to China and Korea, where the top teams scrim and play versus world-class teams on a daily basis. To make it even harder, the Eastern teams can scrim between LCK, LMS, or LPL if need be. The Western teams are on a back foot in terms of team strengths the moment they step onto international competition. Boot camping. Is it really that beneficial for Western teams? So since 2014, Western teams have been boot camping in Korea in preparation for Worlds and to learn from the Eastern teams that live in Korea. And you can also scrim Chinese teams by boot camping in Korea. So boot camping is never easy, just as a basis, like boot camping and prepping for a competition. But boot camping in a foreign country, eating strange foods, and playing versus competition, and scrimming versus them, and who might stop scrimming you completely if you perform badly, with so much stress and pressure on the players and the coaching staff. And also, one thing that happens is the Korean teams play a very fast-paced game. They play a lot of priority comps, they don't make mistakes, and the kind of draft and the style they do is sometimes really different from NA. And in NA, often enough, teams will make mistakes a lot, so you want to draft a more well-balanced comp that's good for mid and late game. So NA teams will come to Korea, do well, and slowly catch up, and they'll try to emulate the Koreans and playing their way of game, playing the standard Korean way. And by playing that style, you fall into the trap of being lesser versions of the Korean teams. So these top tier Korean teams and top tier LCK teams scrim versus lesser versions of themselves, the lower class LCK teams, all the time, and they beat them no problem, and you make it so easy for them to beat them by losing your own identity and slowly transforming into like a lesser version or the standard Korean team. If you look at the biggest upset in the recent history of Worlds, it's been like Obelisk Nogs playing their own style and having their unique style, and also most importantly Misfits versus SKT recently. In the heavy Ardent meta, Ignar pulled out a lot of aggressive picks that SKT wasn't prepared for, and he forced SKT to play the Misfits game, and it put SKT in a really uncomfortable position, and they took them to game 5, which was a great accomplishment for a team that started out earlier as a challenger team this year to making Worlds for the very first time. And I think that's really an important takeaway. By boot camping and prepping for the Korean and the Chinese teams, a lot of times the Western teams will lose their identity and just make it a lot easy for the Eastern teams to smash them. Slower to adapt and less structured coaching staff. Due to underdevelopment of coaching in the West and the history of esports in the East, the structure for coaching staff and how the teams are run is completely different. In the West, star players are really rare and irreplaceable, and they often have huge say on teams, while Eastern teams operate more top-down due to how the culture is and how the history of esports have been, and these teams, they've been running for a long time. And they also have so many top-tier players available. When players often speak up or difficult to work with, it's very easy to replace that top-tier player on an Eastern team compared to a Western team. And players having a lot of say necessarily isn't a bad thing. Players should lead and they should have their own voice. But when competing at a top level, it can be the difference maker compared to the Korean or the Chinese teams who are operating top down, where the coaching staff has complete control. The coaching staff will listen to the players and take in their input, but at the end of the day, they will make decisions and they'll be under one unified voice, whether it be right or wrong. While on Western teams, there can often be a struggle between coaching staff or even between players themselves. So you have a lot of voices and you run into a situation where there's too many cooks in the kitchen and you become slower to adapt and you're not as fast paced as the Eastern teams between week 1 and week 2, and that's where NA and EU I feel like suffers the most. So those were my reasons for why I think the Western teams don't do as well versus the Eastern teams at Worlds. But it's been like an ongoing trend, and hopefully with franchising and teams being more and more structured top down, and with coaches being more and more experienced, hopefully the Eastern teams can be caught up by these Western teams. It was so exciting at Worlds when Misfits brought SKT to a Game 5 and they had a legitimate chance of winning, and it wasn't just SKT and other Korean teams smashing everyone. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my piece on personally why I think the Western teams do a little bit worse than the Eastern teams at Worlds, maybe a lot worse. There's been standout performances from Western teams and players, and I'll be coming up with the top 7 Western players' performances at Worlds. I always want to hear your opinions, so leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Oh, one last thing, I'm not crazy, I'm just Loco.